The war had been rumbling in the distance all night low, thunderous booms rolling over the hills like the growl of some restless beast. By dawn, the fighting had shifted miles away, leaving behind only smoke, silence, and the bitter smell of spent gunpowder. The land between the old Buckner farmhouse and the dry creek bed was littered with abandoned bedrolls, shattered wagons, and scattered horseshoes half buried in mud. It was not a place where anyone should have been lingering. But war had a way of pulling people into its ruins. Elias Ward, a Union scout with a reputation for sharp eyes and a sharper loyalty, moved through the quiet morning with wary steps. He was used to motion, to noise, to the constant pounding in his chest that never really left a man who lived between bullets and orders. But this eerie stillness put him more on edge than any battlefield. Every snapped twig felt like a shot being fired. He approached the abandoned Buckner barn, hearing the distant creak of weather-worn boards swaying with the breeze. The Union Army had camped here the previous night, but at dawn they were ordered south. Elias stayed behind to salvage whatever supplies the troops had missed: water barrels, rags, maybe even spare cartridges. Scouts were often left alone like this, trusted and forgotten all at once. Across the field, hidden by the low fog rising from the ground, Rosalind Rosa Mercer moved with equal caution. A Confederate courier, she knew the risks of traveling anywhere near recently occupied ground. But she had her mission: retrieve any maps or dispatches left behind during the night's chaos. Her gray dress, patched and darkened with soot, helped her blend with the haze. She clutched her satchel tight to her chest, knowing one wrong step could mean death. Inside the barn, shafts of light pierced the loose boards, illuminating floating dust like stars in a dim sky. Elias stepped around a fallen beam, alert, scanning the shadows. He saw the tracks before he saw her small footprints. Lighter than any soldier's, recent. He straightened, hand instinctively going to his holster. Rosa stepped out from behind a stack of broken crates at the same moment, a quiet gasp escaping her. Her eyes widened. The enemy uniform hit her like cold water. Elias was tall, broad-shouldered, his blue coat dusty but unmistakable. She froze. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The barn held its breath with them. Elias's fingers twitched toward his revolver, but he didn't draw it. Something in the way she held herself, fearful yet determined, told him she wasn't here to kill anyone. She looked young, though her eyes held the weight of too many miles and too many lies told to survive. A courier, maybe. Or a spy. Rosa's heartbeat pounded so loudly she feared he could hear it. She saw the tension in his jaw, the readiness in his stance, and she braced for the sound of a shot. Even so, her hands didn't reach for the knife in her boot. She couldn't explain why. Perhaps exhaustion. Perhaps intuition. The silence between them stretched, tight as wire. "Drop your bag," Elias finally said, voice low, not a shout, not a threat, more like a warning. Rosa didn't move. She kept her chin lifted, though her breath trembled. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said softly. "Just passing through. On a battlefield?" Elias raised a brow. "Same reason as you, I reckon," she murmured. "Trying to survive." He didn't answer. He didn't lower his guard. But he didn't raise his weapon either. That was the first moment, brief, fragile, and impossible, that began everything. The uneasy silence inside the dilapidated barn stretched on, held together by nothing more than two steady breaths and two trembling hands. Elias didn't take his eyes off the Confederate woman, and Rosa didn't allow herself to blink, afraid any movement would tip the balance. It was one of those moments in war where a single heartbeat could decide whether two strangers lived or died. But then the world made the choice for them. A deep rumble rolled across the valley, a leftover cannon blast from a regiment miles away. Or maybe just the earth settling after too much violence. Whatever the cause, the vibration was enough to shake loose the already fragile beams overhead. Rosa heard it first, a groan of old wood that made her spine go rigid. "Move," she whispered. Elias reacted instantly. He threw himself sideways as a beam snapped with a loud crack. Rosa dove in the opposite direction. Dust and splinters exploded into the air as half the barn roof collapsed, slamming down between them like a wall raised by fate itself. The crash echoed over the empty farmland. For several moments, neither of them moved. Elias coughed through the dust cloud, blinking grit from his eyes. He could barely make out shapes in the thick haze. He didn't know if she was buried, unconscious, or scrambling for a weapon. "Hey," he called, voice rough. "You alive over there?" A moment of silence. Then a weak but steady reply, "I'm not dead yet." He exhaled, half in relief, half in disbelief that he cared whether the enemy courier survived. He pushed debris aside, muscles straining, and crawled toward the jagged gap. On the other side, Rosa did the same. Though her movements were slower, one beam had clipped her shoulder and torn her sleeve. They reached the same broken opening at nearly the same moment, faces inches apart through the drifting dust. Both froze, stunned by the closeness. Elias was the first to recover. "We're lucky that didn't crush us." Rosa managed a strained smile. "Or unlucky. Now we're trapped together." The barn doors had buckled inward under the collapse. The beams that fell blocked the main exit, and the side walls were too weak to climb without bringing the whole structure down. Elias tested a board, and it groaned ominously. "No way out," he muttered. Rosa tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "So what now? You planning to arrest me?" "If we were outside," he said honestly, "maybe. And in here?" Elias hesitated, staring at her across the mess of broken timber. She was breathing hard, wincing with every motion, her dress streaked with dust but her eyes clearer than before. She was scared, he could see it, but she wasn't begging. She wasn't panicking. That alone made him pause. "In here," he said at last. "I'm not keen on shooting a woman who just avoided getting crushed beside me." Rosa studied him, trying to decide if he meant it. She'd met Union soldiers before, some cruel, some kind. Elias Ward didn't strike her as either. He seemed weary, guarded, but not hateful. She extended her hand across the debris. "Temporary truce?" Elias stared at her hand, surprised. "You really trust me?" "No," she said simply. "But I don't see another choice." He gave a short, dry laugh, a rare sound that seemed to surprise him as much as her. Then he reached out and took her hand. Her grip was firm, warmer than he expected. For a moment, the war outside felt a little farther away. Once they pulled back, Elias began scanning the barn again. "We need to find another way out. A hole in the wall, a loose board. Anything." Rosa stood carefully, favoring her injured shoulder. "All right, but we're doing this together." And so they began working side by side, not as enemies. Not as allies, but as two human beings trapped by circumstance, forced into cooperation by falling wood and the stubbornness of fate. It was small, almost insignificant compared to the battles raging across the nation, but it was the beginning of their story. By late afternoon, the sun had broken through the thinning fog, turning the collapsed barn into an oven of trapped heat and impatience. Elias and Rosa had spent hours searching for a way out, testing boards, shifting debris, and attempting to squeeze through gaps too narrow even for a child. The barn wasn't built to be elegant, but it was built to endure, and the collapse had reinforced it into a stubborn cage. Rosa sat on a half-buried crate, rubbing her injured shoulder. "If we stay in here any longer, we'll both roast alive." Elias wiped sweat from his brow. "I'd rather roast than get shot. There's a Union patrol due to circle back by nightfall. If we're lucky, they'll hear us." She stiffened. Union soldiers finding me isn't luck." He paused, realizing the unintended cruelty of what he'd said. "I won't let them harm you," he added quietly. Her gaze flicked to him, uncertain, searching. She wasn't used to kindness from the other side. Not in this war. A distant rumble outside broke the moment, wheels creaking, hooves striking earth. Elias tensed. Someone's out there. Rosa's breath hitched. She quickly reached for her satchel, gripping it tightly. "If they're Confederates, you're the one in danger." Before Elias could reply, the barn wall gave a shudder. A wagon, unaware of the weakened structure, had nudged against the outside frame. The force was just enough to dislodge a loose plank near the back corner. Light streamed in through the gap. Elias' eyes widened. "That's our way out." With coordinated effort, they pried the opening wide enough to crawl through. Elias went first, scanning the landscape with soldier's instinct. A small supply wagon abandoned, the horse long gone. Broken fences. And distant smoke rising from the hills. The area was deserted. Rosa slid out behind him, clutching her satchel against her chest. Her movements were careful, as if the open air itself might shoot at her. Elias stretched his back, savoring the freedom. "We need to move. It's safer in the woods." Rosa hesitated. "I can't go with you." He turned. "You want to get caught out here alone?" "I have to finish my mission." Her fingers tightened over her satchel. "There are people counting on me." The wind lifted her hair just enough for him to glimpse the truth in her eyes: fear, duty, desperation. He'd seen that look in young soldiers forced into roles they never wanted. "What's in the bag?" he asked carefully. "Nothing you need to concern yourself with," she said, too quickly. Elias stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "If it's intelligence, Rosa, carrying Confederate dispatches through Union territory is suicide." She flinched. His saying her name softly, like he cared, threw her off more than his warning. A gunshot cracked through the air. Rosa stumbled, collapsing to her knees as a blossom of red appeared on her upper arm. Elias spun, pistol drawn, scanning the tree line for the shooter. But the woods were still. No movement. No second shot. "Stray fire," he muttered, lowering his weapon. "Someone miles off target." Rosa tried to stand but swayed, dizzy. Her satchel spilled from her arms, the flap opening just enough for Elias to see a glimpse of a seal. A wax emblem. Military markings. His breath caught. "You're carrying a dispatch." She snatched the bag back to her, trembling. "I have to deliver it. If I don't, lives will be lost, people I know, people I can't abandon." Elias knelt beside her, tearing his sleeve to wrap her bleeding arm. "You're in no condition to walk, let alone outrun patrols." She squeezed her eyes shut, pained. "I don't have a choice." He tied the cloth firmly, then met her gaze with grim resolve. "You do now," he said. "Because I'm not leaving you to die." Her eyes widened. "Why would you help me?" "I'm your enemy." "No," he said quietly. "You're a wounded woman in a war that's already taken enough." She stared at him. Something fragile and dangerous stirring behind her ribs. And then she whispered the truth that would change everything. That letter could end hundreds of lives. Elias' jaw clenched, his loyalty and conscience colliding like storm fronts. He didn't know what he'd choose yet, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't letting her go alone. Elias hadn't carried another person in years, not since pulling wounded comrades off battlefields littered with smoke and screams. But when Rosa's knees buckled again, he reacted instantly. He slung her uninjured arm around his shoulder and helped her rise. She tried protesting, mumbling that she could walk, that she didn't need help from a Union scout, but every time she took a step, her breath hitched with pain. By the time they reached the tree line, Rosa's stubborn resolve had crumbled into exhausted silence. Elias guided her through the woods with practiced ease. He knew these paths, knew where the fallen logs were, where soldiers had camped the week prior, where Confederates had ambushed a column 2 nights earlier. Rosa, though weak and pale, kept glancing over her shoulder, terrified of being discovered. "Slow down," he whispered. "You're bleeding more." "I can't stop," she insisted, clutching the satchel tighter. "If someone finds us, if they find me." "They won't," Elias said firmly. "I'm taking you somewhere safe." His voice left no room for argument. Exhaustion stole whatever defiance Rosa might have clung to. The woods thinned as they approached a clearing where an old stone church stood. Its steeple cracked. Its roof caved in long ago, vines claiming the walls like nature's quiet victory over mankind. The scattered gravestones leaning at odd angles gave the place an eerie calm. As though ghosts watched silently from beneath the overgrowth, Rosa halted. "Elias, this is a ruin." "It's shelter," he replied. "And nobody searches ruins." Inside, the air was cool and shadowed. Sunlight streamed in through gaps in the roof, illuminating patches of moss and broken pews. Birds roosted in the rafters above, fluttering away when Elias eased Rosa down onto a bench still intact enough to hold her. She winced, gripping her wounded arm. Crimson had already soaked through the makeshift bandage. "Let me take a look," he said, kneeling beside her. "I can do it," she whispered, though her voice trembled with weakness. He met her eyes. "Rosa, you can barely stay upright." A long silence stretched between them before she finally sighed and nodded. Elias gently peeled back the blood-soaked cloth. The bullet had grazed her, not lodged, but sliced through flesh deep enough to cause significant bleeding. Rosa clenched her jaw, refusing to cry out even as his fingers cleaned the wound with careful precision. Elias worked with a soldier's practiced hands. Steady and efficient, but his expression softened every time she winced. "You've treated wounds." "Before," she murmured through gritted teeth. "Too many," he replied quietly. She studied his face strong. Lines carved by sun and hardship, eyes both tired and vigilant. "Why are you helping me? Truly?" He finished tying the new bandage before answering. "Because no one deserves to die alone in the woods. Not even someone wearing gray." Her breath caught. Not because of pain. The silence inside the ruins felt strangely intimate, as if the broken walls held their conversation with reverence. A place meant for confession, now sheltering 2 people who should have been sworn enemies. Rosa leaned back against the cool stone. "If your men find me, they'll shoot me on sight." Elias didn't meet her gaze at first. "I know. You'd be considered a traitor." He finally looked at her. "Maybe, but leaving you out there would have made me less of a man." For a moment, Rosa forgot about the war. Forgot about the letter pressing against her ribs. Forgot the lines drawn in blood and loyalty. She saw only the man before her, guarded, weary, but good. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "No," Elias said softly. "But I want to." Her breath stilled up before either could say more. The snap of a twig echoed outside. Elias' posture changed instantly, soldier mode returning. He pressed a finger to his lips, silently ordering her to stay quiet, and moved toward the ruined doorway. Rosa clutched her satchel, pulse quickening, because now, in this fragile moment of trust and vulnerability, danger had found them again. The sound was faint, just the brittle snap of a twig under a boot, but in a forest at war, it was as loud as a gunshot. Elias froze at the church doorway, one hand hovering over his holster, eyes scanning the dense shadows between the trees. Rosa, still propped against the stone wall, held her breath until her lungs burned. She knew that sound too well. It was the sound of soldiers who thought they were hunting something weak or someone alone. Elias motioned for her to stay silent and ducked behind the crumbling archway. He moved with the careful precision of a man who'd spent years surviving ambushes. His heartbeat slowed, his breathing calmed, becoming that tense stillness only soldiers understood. Another twig snapped. Closer. Then voices. Tracks end by the creek. Someone came through here recently. Rebels? Another voice asked. Or deserters, the first voice muttered. Either way, Captain wants this whole area swept. Rosa's pulse jumped. Union soldiers. If they found her, she wouldn't live long enough to explain anything. She squeezed her satchel to her chest, praying the pounding in her ears didn't give her away. Elias turned back toward her, his expression sharp, urgent. He didn't have to speak for her to understand. If they find you, I can't save you. He hurried to her, crouching low. You need to hide, now? Where? She whispered, panic rising like a tide. He scanned the ruins quickly, then grabbed her uninjured hand and guided her to the far corner where the church's old altar had collapsed inward. Beneath it was a gap big enough for her to crawl under, concealed by fallen beams and shadow. It wasn't comfortable, but it was cover. Get in, he whispered. Rosa's throat tightened. Elias. They'll question you, I know. And if they think you're hiding someone, I'll handle it. The steadiness in his voice struck her harder than any bullet. He wasn't just risking punishment. If they suspected him of aiding a Confederate courier, they'd court-martial him. Hang him, she grabbed his sleeve. Why are you doing this? He held her gaze, something fierce and unspoken burning behind his eyes. Because you're not dying here. Not like this. Before she could answer, the crunch of boots drew nearer. Elias gently but firmly pushed her beneath the rubble. Stay silent, he murmured. No matter what you hear. Rosa crawled back into the shadows, biting down on her trembling lip as debris scraped her legs and arms. Darkness swallowed her. Elias dragged a piece of broken timber in front of the gap just as the first soldier appeared through the trees. 3 Union men entered the ruins. Rifles drawn. Elias stepped forward, hands loose at his sides, the picture of calm authority. You're late, he said. One man blinked. Lieutenant Ward? Elias nodded. Scouting the area. Thought you boys had moved on already. Orders changed, the soldier said. Captain thinks there may be rebels hiding near the old road. Elias shrugged. Nothing here but rotting wood and field mice. The men fanned out, checking corners, nudging debris with their boots. Rosa clamped a hand over her mouth beneath the altar rubble, tears burning her eyes. Her wounded arm throbbed, but she didn't dare move. A soldier kicked a loose stone near her hiding place. The echo rang inches from her ear. She prayed something she hadn't done in years. Elias stepped forward sharply. Careful. Structure's unstable. Whole thing nearly fell on me earlier. The soldier lowered his rifle. Looks clear enough. Good, Elias said coolly. Captain wants us back before nightfall. After a long, tense moment, the patrol finally turned and headed out of the ruins, their shadows stretching long across the moss-covered floor before vanishing entirely. The forest went silent again. Rosa didn't move until Elias called softly. It's safe. She crawled out slowly, blinking against the sudden light. Her legs shook so badly she nearly fell. Elias caught her by the arms. You're all right, he murmured, steadying her. They're gone. But Rosa could see the truth in his eyes. They had climbed a dangerous step closer to something neither of them could name. And the consequences were coming for both of them. Night settled over the ruins like a heavy blanket, turning the shattered church into a cavern of shadows. The forest beyond hummed with crickets and distant owls, but inside the stone shell, everything felt still too still. The kind of quiet that made every whispered thought loud. Elias lit a small lantern he'd scavenged earlier, shielding the flame with his palm so it didn't shine through the broken walls. A soft halo of warm light filled the space, casting gold against Rosa's pale, tired face. "You should rest," he murmured. Rosa sat on the worn bench, her wounded arm resting in her lap. "I doubt I could sleep even if I tried." He knelt beside her again, checking the bandage. "It's still bleeding a little." "You lost more blood than I realized. I'll manage." "Not if you keep pushing yourself," he said, a hint of frustration slipping through. Her gaze drifted to the lantern's glow. She watched the flame almost fearfully, as if it reflected a truth she'd been trying to outrun. Elias could see it, the weight of something she hadn't said yet. Something she feared he'd judge her for. "Rosa," he said gently, "you've been looking over your shoulder since the moment I found you. You're carrying more than that wound." She tensed, clutching her satchel against her stomach. Elias reached out, not touching her, just inviting her attention. "Talk to me." A long silence filled the ruins, broken only by the soft crackle of the lantern. Rosa's eyes glimmered, fear, shame, exhaustion, all tangled together. She finally exhaled, the sound shaky and surrendering. "You already know what's in the bag," she whispered. "Not exactly," he replied. "But I'm guessing it's something important. Dangerous." She nodded. Her fingers trembled as she loosened the flap, revealing the sealed envelope inside, marked with a Confederate stamp. "It's a dispatch," she said softly. "A major one." Elias stared at it, his expression unreadable. Rosa continued, voice cracking, "It's a retreat order, one that would save an entire regiment caught near the river. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds." She swallowed hard. "My brother is among them." The confession hit Elias like a blow. A retreat order, a document that could spare lives on her side. And she'd been willing to risk everything to deliver it. Rosa's eyes pleaded with him. "You think I want any of this? I don't care about flags. Or causes. I care about keeping my family alive." Emotion swelled in her voice until it broke. "I've already lost my father. I can't lose my brother too." Elias leaned back on his heels, absorbing her words. A Union scout, sworn to stop Confederate movements, now sat inches away from a woman carrying intelligence that could save the enemy. He stared at the envelope. A dozen choices folded into one small piece of paper. "You could take it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Read it. Deliver it to your officers. It would give the Union an advantage. They'd reward you." He didn't move. Rosa's eyes filled with tears she fought to hold back. "If you destroy it, I'll be branded a failure. My people will die. My brother will die." Her voice collapsed into a whisper. "Please, Elias. I just want to save him." The lantern flickered. As if the flame itself trembled with the weight of the moment, Elias reached forward, not for the letter, but for Rosa's shaking hands. "Rosa," he said softly, "I'm not here to win a war tonight." She looked up, stunned. "And I'm not going to let you lose your family because of me." Then, without breaking eye contact, Elias took the dispatch and held it near the lantern flame. Rosa's breath caught. "Elias," but he wasn't hesitating. The flame touched the edge of the envelope, and the paper curled, darkened, and burst into embers. Rosa gasped, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do that?" He looked at her, expression raw. "Because I want this war to end. Not you." Rosa covered her mouth with her hand, overwhelmed by relief, by fear, by something she couldn't name. In that ruined church, with the war pressing in from all directions, they crossed a line neither could ever step back from, and they both knew it. The storm that had been threatening all afternoon finally broke as dusk fell, turning the forest into a wet, whispering world of shadows. Rain drummed against the old hunting cabin where Elena and Captain Wyatt had taken refuge, its steady rhythm masking the distant echoes of gunfire still rumbling across the valley. The war was inching closer. They both felt it in their bones. Inside, the dim fire crackled low, casting warm light across Wyatt's face as he sat on the floor with his back against the wall, his injured shoulder bandaged with strips of Elena's underskirt. He was pale, still recovering from the bullet he'd taken 2 days prior, the bullet meant for her. Elena knelt beside him, pressing a fresh cloth to his wound. Her hands were steady, but her heart was not. Every time she saw the angry red welt, guilt twisted through her. "You should be resting," she said softly. Wyatt smirked faintly. "And let you fuss over me without supervision? Not a chance." It was the first time since she'd met him that his voice carried no edge, no suspicion, no command. Just warmth. She swallowed hard. They had been strangers from enemy camps, thrown together by accident and fate. And now, after days of running, hiding, and surviving side by side, everything felt painfully, dangerously personal. Wyatt watched her closely, his usually hard gaze softened by exhaustion and something else, something he hadn't dared express until now. "Elena," he murmured. "You're shivering, Sit." "I'm fine," she insisted, but a tremor betrayed her. She turned away quickly, busied herself with the kettle over the fire. Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, truth pressed between them like another presence. Wyatt's voice broke the silence. "Why did you stay with me? You could have left when I passed out. You had the chance." Elena froze. The steam from the kettle blurred her vision, but she knew that wasn't why her eyes suddenly burned. "I don't leave people behind," she whispered. "You should have left me behind," he said. "You're risking your own life for a man who," he hesitated, "who was supposed to be your enemy." She turned then, anger and hurt swirling together. "You took a bullet for me. You nearly died. Don't pretend you would have left me either." Wyatt didn't deny it. He couldn't. For a long moment, neither spoke. Rain drummed harder on the roof, the fire hissed and spit, and the world outside the cabin faded until only the two of them remained. Finally, Wyatt exhaled shakily. "I don't know when it happened, but somewhere between arguing with you, saving you, and getting shot, I stopped seeing you as the enemy." Her breath caught. "And now?" she whispered. He met her eyes, and there was no shield left between them. "Now I see you? Just you." The wall she'd kept tightly around herself wavered. She sank down beside him, closer now, close enough to feel his warmth even through the chill. "I don't want this war to decide who I am," she said, voice trembling, "or who I care about." Wyatt lifted a hand, shaking, but gentle, and brushed a damp strand of hair from her cheek. "Then let tonight be ours," he said quietly. "No sides, no uniforms, just truth." Elena's heart hammered painfully. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, battle, betrayal, capture, or worse, but Tonight she let herself lean into his touch. Outside, thunder roared. Inside, for the first time, they finally stopped running from each other, and from what they felt, dawn crept slowly over the horizon, casting pale light across the soaked forest floor. The rain had finally ceased, leaving the world dripping, slick, and silent. Elias stirred beneath the tattered remains of his blanket, shoulder still stiff from the bullet wound that Rosa's careful hands had tended to. For a moment, he let the quiet wash over him, until he felt movement beside him. Rosa was already awake, sitting on a fallen log just outside the ruined church, clutching her satchel tightly. Her eyes, rimmed with exhaustion and worry, met his. The brief warmth of night, the fragile truce and confessions they had shared, was gone now, replaced by the harsh light of reality. The Union patrols, the Confederate pursuers, the very war itself, they were waiting beyond the trees. Elias rose slowly, testing his balance. Pain shot through his shoulder, reminding him that every step forward was deliberate. "We need to move," he said quietly, "before anyone finds us." Rosa nodded, but her hand shook as she adjusted the satchel. "I can't stay here either. They'll come searching again, and if they see you helping me—" Her voice faltered. "You could be court-martialed. Worse." "I know," he said. His tone was steady, but beneath it was a raw edge of determination. "And I don't care. I can't leave you out here alone." Her lips parted, a mix of fear and gratitude flickering across her face. She knew he meant it. And yet, the reality was undeniable. Moving through enemy lines would be a gamble. Neither of them could afford to lose. They set off through the trees, Elias leading with careful, deliberate steps, scouting the path ahead. He avoided the beaten trails and stayed in the shadows, pressing Rosa close whenever they neared open ground. Every branch snapped beneath their boots like a warning shot, and every bird startled into flight seemed to betray their presence. Hours passed. Hunger clawed at them, but the danger was constant enough that they could not pause for long. Elias leaned on Rosa briefly when a sudden pain shot through his shoulder, and she instinctively braced him, murmuring reassurances that he did not need but accepted anyway. Finally, they reached the edge of a shallow creek, a natural boundary between Union and Confederate patrol routes. Elias crouched behind a fallen tree, scanning the waterway. "We'll have to cross here," he whispered. "The other side leads toward the Union encampment. It's risky, but safer than staying." Rosa hesitated. "And if they spot me? Or if they think you're helping me?" Her voice was barely audible, trembling. Elias reached out, gripping her arm gently but firmly. "We'll make it, together. You just have to trust me." Her heart clenched, torn between fear and the undeniable truth. She did trust him. Not fully, perhaps, but enough to follow him across a line that could mean life or death for both of them. The crossing was tense. Water lapped at their boots, slippery rocks threatening to betray each step. Shadows of patrols flitted along the banks. Each breath they drew felt like a gamble. Every step forward was silent, measured, desperate. Rosa's heart pounded in her chest, echoing the thundering pulse in Elias's injured shoulder as he leaned on her when fatigue overtook him. When they finally reached the opposite bank, the first rays of sun caught on Union tents in the distance. Safety or something approaching, it was within reach. But Elias didn't relax completely. Not yet. Not until Rosa's hand left his and she was safely behind the first line of soldiers. "Stay here," he instructed, his voice low. "I'll explain everything." Rosa shook her head. "No, we move together. You saved me once. Don't leave me now." Elias met her gaze, surprised by her courage, and a quiet understanding passed between them. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side. And for the first time in weeks, they allowed themselves to hope just a little that surviving the war might be possible, that perhaps somehow they could cross the enemy lines without losing each other. Union camp stretched out before them, tents pitched neatly in rows, flags snapping in the gentle morning breeze. The air was thick with the scent of cooked coffee, damp earth, and the faint tang of gunpowder from overnight skirmishes. Elias and Rosa crouched in the tall grass just beyond the camp perimeter, the weight of every choice they had made pressing down on them. Rosa's hands trembled around her satchel. "If they find this," she murmured, "if they see me, they won't understand. They'll think I'm a spy." Elias placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Then you won't go in alone. I'll go with you. We tell the truth together." Her breath caught. She had not expected this. The man who should have been her enemy, the man who had every reason to hand her over, was risking his safety again, this time willingly, knowingly for her. Her chest tightened with a mixture of gratitude, fear, and something deeper she had yet to name. They rose cautiously, moving as shadows between the tents. The guards' attention wavered. Some were already busy with morning routines, others still waking from night duty. Every step felt monumental, every glance a possible end to what little chance they had. Finally, they reached the command tent, a large canvas structure near the center of the camp. Elias signaled for her to stay close as they stepped inside. The commanding officer, a tall, stern man with piercing eyes, looked up sharply from the papers on his desk. "Lieutenant Ward," he said, surprise and suspicion warring in his voice. "What brings you in at this hour?" Elias bowed slightly. "Sir, I bring someone who needs protection and an explanation." The officer raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "Explain." Rosa stepped forward, clutching her satchel to her chest. Her voice trembled, but her resolve held. "I am Rosa Mercer, a Confederate courier. I was wounded and rescued by Lieutenant Ward. I came to surrender alive, unarmed, and with nothing but my word." There was a long pause. Soldiers in the tent exchanged uneasy glances. The officer's eyes narrowed, scrutinizing her every detail, the sweat on her brow, the tear tracks on her cheeks, the raw honesty in her gaze. "You're lying," one of the men muttered. "I swear I am not," Elias interjected firmly. She risked everything to deliver information, but she did not compromise any of our positions. "I can vouch for her." The officer's face softened slightly, though suspicion lingered. He gestured to a nearby chair. "Sit, tell me everything." "Every detail." Rosa hesitated, glancing at Elias. He nodded reassuringly. Taking a deep breath, she began recounting the events of the past days. The barn, the collapse, the bullet, the ruined church, and the burning of the dispatch. Her voice grew steadier as she spoke, each word a testament to the truth she had lived. Elias watched her carefully, silently conveying his support. He knew the camp's judgment would determine her fate. And yet, seeing her stand there, alive, telling the story with courage, something inside him shifted. Hope flickered in a world built on fear and survival. When she finished, the officer leaned back, exhaling slowly. "You've risked a lot to save someone from your own side," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Yet here you are, alive, and your story checks out." He turned to Elias. "And you, Lieutenant, vouching for her? You're willing to stake your reputation on this?" Elias met his gaze steadily. "Yes, sir." The officer's eyes lingered on Rosa a moment longer, then finally nodded. "She will be allowed to remain under guard until further orders. No harm will come to her. Lieutenant Ward, make sure she remains safe." Rosa's knees almost gave way with relief. Elias steadied her again. She could feel the weight of the past days lift slightly, replaced with the fragile hope that perhaps, after everything, they had survived together. Outside the tent, the morning sun climbed higher. Birds chirped cautiously in the clearing, and the war felt, for the first time, just a little more bearable. But Elias and Rosa knew freedom and peace were only the beginning. Trust and survival would take more than luck. They would have to fight for it. Together. The war was over. Months of bloodshed, heartbreak, and loss had finally ended, leaving towns and camps scattered across the countryside in a fragile calm. Smoke had cleared from the horizon, replaced by the golden light of a sun that seemed to promise new beginnings. Yet for Elias Ward, the quiet still felt strange, unnatural almost. He had survived bullets, betrayal, and long days of exhaustion, but the war had left its marks deeper than any wound could. He walked through the small border town, where he had promised to return. The streets were lined with simple wooden houses and shops opening to the morning light. The scent of freshly baked bread mingled with the soft tang of river air. Children ran past, laughing in a way that had seemed impossible during the long years of conflict. It was peace. It was life. And it was foreign to him. He had come here for one reason, Rosa. Months ago, in the woods and ruins, she had been just another face in gray uniform, an enemy, a courier, a threat. But she had become more than that. She had become the tether to his humanity, the reason he risked everything, the reason he survived. And he had not allowed the war to take her from him. He paused outside a small clinic at the edge of town, where women tended the sick and wounded, hands gentle, voices soft. Through the open window he glimpsed her, Rosa, now wearing a nurse's apron, tending to a patient with calm precision and quiet kindness. Her hair was neatly tied back, her face serene yet alert. She moved with the confidence of someone who had faced impossible odds and lived. His chest tightened. She had survived. She had thrived. And now, after all the fear, all the blood, and all the uncertainty, he was here to see her. Rosa looked up from her patient and froze. Her eyes widened in recognition, then softened. For a heartbeat, time seemed to suspend. The war, the danger, the fear all melted away, leaving only them, standing apart and yet inexorably drawn together. "Elias," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the murmurs of the clinic. He smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Rosa." She stepped closer, and he felt the years of worry and tension fall away with every step she took. When they finally stood face to face, there was a quiet understanding in the space between them, a bond forged not in comfort, but in danger, trust, and survival. The war had tried to divide them, but it had also brought them together, tested them in ways no ordinary life ever could. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," she said softly. Though her hands were steady, her voice sure. "You'll never get rid of me that easily," he replied, his tone lighter than she had heard in years. But beneath it, there was seriousness, a promise. He would never leave her side. For a long moment, they simply stood there, two strangers once, enemies once, now survivors, now something entirely different. Around them, the town went about its peaceful mourning, oblivious to the story of bravery and connection that had played out beyond its streets. But for Elias and Rosa, the world had narrowed to the two of them. Finally, she offered him a small smile, one that carried both relief and hope. He took her hand gently, feeling the warmth, the reality of her presence, the life they had fought to keep intact. It was not just survival. It was the start of something entirely new. Elias drew a deep breath. "The war is over," he said. "But this is just the beginning." Rosa nodded, squeezing his hand. "Together," she said. "Together," he echoed. As they walked away from the clinic, through the quiet streets and into the rising sun, it was not the war that defined them anymore. It was the bond forged in danger, tempered in trust, and strengthened by sacrifice. Two souls who should have been enemies, standing side by side in the peace they had both bled for, ready to face whatever life came next. Together. And for the first time in years, they were free.